Grace and peace, you guys. April Chapman here with the Standard of Truth podcast, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. Today's guest, I am so excited to do this interview, you guys, because I'm sitting down with a former classroom instructor turned homeschool advocate, and her name is Sarah Ream. And Sarah is a wonderful woman of God. She is a Christian. She is a wife. She is a mom. And she is dedicated to embracing the beauty of family life one day at a time. What makes sitting down with Sarah so unique is because she brings a perspective about what's really going on in our public educational system. And some of the information, you guys, that she shared with me was so shocking that I needed a minute to kind of just digest it all. And I am eager to share this information with you because I believe that once you learn the truth about what's really going on in this nation's K through 12 system, that one of two things are going to happen. Either you are going to be forced to make a decision and you're going to go before the Lord to say, Lord, what is it that you want our family to do? Because this is a lot. It's going to force you to kind of just re-examine some of the decisions that you've made and maybe how you've even structured your life. And I'm just excited to hear and to learn and to educate you on why Christians will probably need to just get their heads out of the sand and perhaps make some different decisions as it relates to how you intend going forward to educate your children. So, without further ado, please welcome to the show my sister in the Lord, Mrs. Sarah Ream. Hey, girlie.
Hi, how are you? How are you
I
doing?
am doing wonderful. I'm so glad that we've had this opportunity to sit down, and we've got a lot to cover. So first of all, I've already kind of introduced you to the audience, but if you wouldn't mind, take a little time to just tell us a little bit more about your background in the public educational system.
Well, I was a teacher for about 10 years. I'm certified in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Texas. I worked as a math department head, a math coach, and a math teacher. I've taught middle school and high school math.
Okay, that's a lot. So you're no rookie here. You didn't just enter
No.
the system and say, "Oh, this was too much and I'm going to step out." You've actually worn multiple hats. So you've been able to kind of experience the K through 12 system in a myriad of ways. And so that's why you guys, she is the subject matter expert on this issue. So the first thing I want to do is ask you, based on all of your experience and everything that you've witnessed in your entire educational career, why do you believe that the current educational system is in crisis? I'm sure there are multiple reasons. Feel free to give us as many as you believe that would be helpful for the audience to understand your position.
Well, especially for a Christian parent, this public school system that teaches students in the absence of God in general.
Mm.
So there's no mention of God. They're learning from this perspective of God not even being a factor. So that fosters secular thought in a student where they don't think about the moral uh, consequences of the behaviors they're doing. They don't think about working in the classroom like they're working for God. So they just, why am I doing this? I don't like school. Why am I here? So they have no external motivation, especially through God.
Okay, I understand what you mean now. So, with that being
Yes.
said, it sounds like the lack of the biblical worldview, which we understand. Obviously, the whole world is not Christianized, so you're going to
Yes.
have secular humanism flourishing in all segments of life. And someone could argue, well, depending on where you work, they don't have a biblical worldview either. Are you saying that, corporate America is in crisis? I'm just playing, devil's
Yes.
advocate here for a moment. When someone hears you say that, oh, well, they don't have a biblical worldview, so therefore it's in crisis, we might have to flesh that out for our opposition a little bit more. So there's got to be other reasons why it's in crisis.
Well, it starts with the society as a whole first. We have a lot of single family households,
Mm.
some by choice and some through divorce. And so there's lack of resources for that student. The parents are overworked, they're working two or three jobs, they cannot be there for their students. And so we're taking the burden of the modern day teacher is so high. We have to be parent, counselor, nurse, uh, everything, food pantry, all the burden falls on the teacher, pretty much.
So that brings up a very interesting point. You're saying because of the conditions at home are not
Hmm.
like they were in yesteryear, meaning children were nurtured, children were
Yes,
disciplined, children were ultimately loved and raised. But now that society's focus is placed on other things such as achieving, financial success, or on the flip side, some families, in all honesty, they're like, we're just trying to survive. It sounds like
yes,
the children are suffering as a result, and these parents are pretty much sending the children to school. And then the educator, like you said, has to become the nurse, the food pantry, the mental health professional on top of the educational instructor. That is a lot of burden to place
yes.
on one individual. I can't imagine if I was a teacher and I have to feed the child, I've got to clothe the child, I've got to walk this child through what they're going through at home. That's not the job of an educator. And
Also, providing supplies for the child. Years ago, we'd give the parents the supply list and they would have all their supplies. Nowadays, we are expected to purchase supplies for the students, paper, pencil, everything that they'll need to be successful. It now falls on us. You can't expect a student to purchase a calculator anymore. I used to teach high school math, middle school math. There's no expectation of that. So the school provides pretty much everything for the student.
Wow. So here's what I guess I don't understand. Okay. Now I'm old, but I'm not that old. I don't ever remember getting those types of resources from the school, but I also don't remember there being a school supply list. Like every school year, you was gonna need some paper, some pencils, and some notebooks, a little trapper keeper, a book bag, and a
Yes.
lunchbox. However, I do remember crayons, construction paper, markers, paint. Those were things that the school provided. How is it that taxpayer money is coming into the school system, but teachers are expected to still purchase supplies for their students? Do you believe that the resources, i.e., the money, the taxpayer money, do you believe that the school system is being a good steward over that money? Because why is it I understand the burden should be on the parents to provide the basics, but why is the responsibility being placed on the teachers to provide or fill in the gaps? Where's the money in the school system?
Well, they just allocate it for other areas. So part of that, the teachers are to blame. If you don't buy it, they will have to buy it. They can't just go without supplies. So we filled in that gap. So now the school system says, well, then now it becomes your responsibility. We decorate our classroom. We spend like thousands of dollars, depending on the elementary school, learning posters, everything manipulative to decorate. You do it all and you're spending thousands of dollars every year. And but what would happen if we didn't do it? It would have to be done. So I think because teachers willingly do it, then that becomes our expectations. Years ago, there was a math coach on every campus, and after the students took a test, they would analyze the data and they would present it back to the teachers and say, you need to work on this subpopulation, this group, etc. Nowadays, you are the math coach. They put that burden on us and we've done it. And so therefore we don't need a math coach. We could cut it out of the budget.
Oh wow. Yeah, I can see how such a resource is so valuable, and now that it's gone, why we're getting
Hmm.
some of the outcomes. So let's shift our focus a little bit. Now, we've talked about some structural things. Everybody knows that when the government is in charge of your money, they're not a good steward over it because it's wasteful
Yes.
spending and they're not efficient. However, I want to shift a little bit to some specific things that you shed some light on, when you and I were talking before the interview about what's really being taught in the US K through
Yes.
12 public school system. Give us some specific examples of some things that are just should not be taught in school that a lot of parents may not know. You do realize your kid learned this at school.
Hmm. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. The education system in general, another reason why it's failing is because there are no longer standards for the work the student has to do. We have lowered that standard. Now, our academic standards are high. The students will be able to uh, divide, you know, do a problem with division in a variety of ways to channel multiple representations, but but your day-to-day classroom standards for what you expect out of the student, turning work in on time, uh, passing the test the first time, that has definitely changed. Students have until the end of the semester to turn in work, which we know in math is cumulative. If you're not doing that work that night, each and every day, you're falling behind. There's no way at the end of the semester you could turn in 50 assignments and have mastered the content area. So it just, to me, it seems like a huge game to try to get kids past and moved along.
So help me to understand, why would the school system go from a standard of we give you an assignment, here's the due date, you're expected to hand it in. How do we go from that to, oh, you have to the end of the semester to turn in all of your work? They can't possibly believe that these students are responsible and accountable enough to actually do that. That it sounds as if, to me, that's more of a sabotaging of a child's educational path, because you can't give a child an assignment and then don't put any sort of expectation on them as to, this is the deadline, this is when it needs to be handed in. Do you have reason to believe why they changed from the due date to just hand it in whatever?
It has to do with the school grade. So they want to avoid failing students at any cost. Failing schools are indication of the community. It's an implication of the area. So if a school has an F, you have less people likely to move there. If a school has an F because the students are failing, it's at risk of shutting down. So what they're doing is manipulating. Uh, Back to the school grade, there's various factors that they grade the school on: failure, attendance rate, failure among subpopulations, like how are your Hispanic students performing, etc. And what they're doing is artificially manipulating those numbers through extending due dates for assignments to make sure that every population looks like they're doing good on paper. Do they think the students are actually learning the material by turning it in at the end of the semester? Absolutely not. But it's a way to satisfy the parents. Parents are sending their kids to school, and frankly, I don't think some of the parents that I interacted with are focused on is the student progressing academically versus did my student pass? Their objective is I need them to pass. That's it.
Yeah, but
Very few
pass,
parents are focused on
by
learning.
what standard are they passing? Just because I gave you an
Exactly.
A doesn't mean you achieved an A. So let me summarize. It sounds like you said that a lot of this has to do with, on paper, the school performance, because that impacts other areas such as the real estate market. No one wants to move to an area that has a failing school system. And so they're like, well, let's just fudge the performance to make it look like the students are really achieving, because we can't have it on paper that this school is failing. That's insane to me.
Yes.
That makes
That they
so.
could control a
No, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. They could control a variety of, let's call them variables, a variety of variables. Attendance is another one that they do. They have the students come in on Saturday to make up hours. And they claim during the Saturday they're receiving some kind of remediation or instruction, but it's they just come in and it's most of the time like copy each other assignments, or they produce the bare minimum, and the work is completely incoherent. I'm looking at the paper like, what is this? And that's what they did during Saturday school, because the person there is not really qualified to teach in all of the content areas. So they're manipulating the attendance rate to make it seem like the students were here. They're manipulating the grades to make it seem like the students actually achieve that grade. And I would go as far to say, and on average, I would say an A of yesteryear, probably when we went to school, is probably a B minus, possibly C plus. So if your student is an A student, they're possibly a C plus to B minus student in reality.
That's horrible. So it
Yes.
sounds like our government school system don't really care. They don't really care about children. They just want
Hmm.
the appearance of a certain outcome without
Yes.
thinking about the future implications if our children don't have the aptitude to compete with their other peers of other nations. That, to me, that weakens the fabric of your country. These are the children that are going to be adults soon. But if the A's that they received were really C's, we're like below average at best. And
Absolutely. And you see that when they're comparing the world achievement rates to our rates, we're definitely below average. And frankly, some companies do not mind outsourcing, having people coming from other countries, because the people there are just stronger academically, math and science wise, as American students. That's our biggest area of weakness, and that has to do with the discipline. If there's no disciplined work, the students aren't doing their work on time every day, they're going to fail in that area. So we've shown failure in math so much, and now literacy is being impacted, and if they cannot read, they cannot do word problems. So we're seeing students who cannot read. There was a school district in, I believe, Chicago that says if you send your children to school, there is no expectation that they will be literate. I was shocked.
wow. So I don't know if you're aware, but there is one particular presidential candidate that is extremely passionate about dismantling the Department of Education and just completely just tearing it down because it's not working and we need to rebuild from the ground up. Do you believe that that is a viable option to kind of fix so much of the despair and the destruction from the educational system? Do you believe it's the Department of Education is where the problem starts?
I do believe so, because a lot of these initiatives, whether it was No Child Behind, Left Behind, or Common Core, have been initiated by the Department of Education, and they have
Mm.
absolutely been nightmares for teachers. They radically changed instruction. We went from a teaching model to now it's almost a sales model, where all of your numbers are micromanaged and tracked, and you need to perform this high, this much. It's like almost like a factory model where we're being measured on, uh, you know, critically measured on student outcomes, things we cannot affect. And we don't have a problem rising to that level. But when you're tying our hands, saying we cannot grade a student as we should, and we cannot enforce timelines for assignments to be due, then we're just tying our hands and we're just up in front of the class teaching every day, and there's no incentive for the student to learn. And it's falling on deaf ears. And all we've heard is, well, it's your responsibility to make the lesson plan more engaging, more fun, so that you get more buy in from the students. That's what we, and if you make it more fun and more engaging, they'll do their homework. They'll work for you. They'll do this and that for you. And it's simply, maybe for a small population, but overall, we as humans, we need standards. We thrive in workplaces with policies and procedures. The children are the same way. They need policies and procedures and standards, and they're not receiving it.
The idea that it's the teacher's fault because the lesson is not more engaging and there's no
Yes.
burden or responsibility placed on the child to say, this is, you have one job. You show up, you do assignments, you turn them in, we test or measure what you've learned, and that's it. I
Yes.
mean, y'all are not a circus. You can't sit and have these kids entertained to death. Listen, it was always understood when I was growing up that you went to school and during those hours, that was learning. Then you had after school, you could do whatever the heck you wanted to do after school. But the time when you were in school, that was your time of instruction. So let's talk a little bit about you've mentioned that there's this lack of standards, and you've also talked a little bit about what's going on in the home. The combination of what's going on or not going on in the home, coupled with there are just no standards or requirements, you have mentioned to me that there is this school to prison pipeline. I'm interested in hearing from you. Talk a little bit about that. Like set that stage up for us. Walk us through, because I will admit at one point I thought it was a myth, because I'm like, there's no way that just because I send my child to school that I'm artificially or unknowingly ushering them into this prison pipeline. In my mind, I'm thinking this is my kid. I'm not raising them to be a criminal. How is the educational system a school to prison pipeline? But after talking to you, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Set that stage up for us. Tell us in grave detail why there is this such thing as a school to prison pipeline, and what does it look like?
Well, just to set the background, so years ago, Obama and his Eric Holder, they identified that the laws on campus were, according to them, they were draconian and they were over prosecuting these students and funneling them into a prison pipeline.
Okay,
And
stop right there. You
yes,
said that according to Eric Holder and former President Obama, they felt that some of the consequences for, was it the behavioral issues, were too draconian and it was too harsh? Like holding
the
children accountable.
criminal
Is that what you're
issues.
saying?
The criminal issues or the laws or infractions that were broken on campus were handled too harshly, therefore funneling the students into the prison pipeline. So, for example, fighting is assault. Outside of
Right.
school setting, fighting is assault and battery. In the school setting, now post their policies that they have implemented, their students are no longer prosecuted for fighting. As a result, students are fighting peers more often, teachers more often. There's a lot more violence reported against teachers, and teachers are on leave, workplace disability, because of students that are perpetuating violence towards them.
So there's violence going on in the school. On the outside of the school property, it would be considered assault, and these children would
Yes.
be, well, depending on where do you live, they may not be prosecuted. But in a normal situation, they would be
Hmm.
prosecuted as you assaulted someone. But if it happens on school grounds, that's not assault.
That's no longer assault. And students are discouraged from defending themselves. We
Huh?
tell a student, yes, we tell a student, if you're being attacked, you just assume the ball position on the ground until administration, campus security gets to you. If you
Girl,
defend
stop,
yourself,
stop. You
yes,
are playing.
no,
Assume
this is
it's
factual.
assume the ball position.
Yeah, they ball up on the ground. That's why you see on the
I've
videos that go
seen
viral.
that.
Yes, the
Yes.
students are balled up on the ground because if they defend themselves, they're now deemed a mutual combatant, which means they will be given a referral or consequence as well, even if it has been determined that they didn't initiate it.
Girl, this is Clown Town. I
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna relax. We're gonna get through this interview. You know how I am. So this now that was new information. You had not talked to me
Yes.
about that. That was my first time hearing that. I can't now. Listen. I got into a fight in school in the fourth grade, and assuming the ball position was not an option. No, if you're trying to fight me, I'm going to defend myself because I knew that if I got home and my sister found out that I got beat up, we was gonna have some problems. I'm not
Furthermore,
advocating the violence.
teachers are also discouraged from defending themselves.
No.
So you notify security and you wait for security to get there in the midst of a student attacking you. And some teachers have gotten concussions, broken bones. I mean, you name it all. This is like a battlefield right now in the average US classroom. I'm not going to say this is happening in the elite schools in New Jersey and Connecticut, but overall in the inner cities in America, Dallas, Houston, New York City, this is going on. This is happening.
Wow. So that's one example. So Eric Holder and Barack Obama, the policies that they implemented has
Mhm.
now caused teachers and students alike. It's pretty much disarmed you from defending yourself, and then they've decriminalized what would be normally considered criminal behavior. So do you mean something like if a student is found with, an illegal substance on campus, how would that be
Absolutely.
handled?
A slap in the wrist, and they're sent to uh, mediation system. They're sent to mediation.
What is
And
that?
so mediation is where they go and they talk to somebody. Do you understand what you did was wrong and how that could
Oh,
negatively affect others on campus? And they're given maybe a probation or something like that. Nothing that's going to affect their legal background. It's pretty much a slap on the wrist. And that leads me to the newest concept, which is called restorative justice. Restorative justice is another thing that they look at nationwide is referrals on a campus. So, restorative justice seeks to replace the referral with counseling. So, you hit a student. So, they might be referred, they might not. Referral meaning they get sent home where they spent time away from campus and they're definitely not prosecuted. Or let's say you disrespect a teacher. And so you call a teacher MFer, okay? You were sent to the principal's office, and here's what restorative justice looks like. Do you understand what you did was wrong? And Billy says, or Bob says, yes, I understand what I did was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, here's a bag of chips and some candy. Go back to class and be respectful to your teacher. This is the new discipline on our US campuses now that has taken Seattle, Washington, states like Washington, very progressive states. They have wholeheartedly embraced these policies, and now it's spreading all over the US. I know friends in Houston, and they have to use those policies as well. So think about the slap in the face. A student calls you an MF, and they come back with chips and candy. That would incentivize other students to disrespect you as well because there's going to be no consequences and you just get counseled and sent back. And they claim that this is great because the referrals have drastically reduced, but the behavior on campus is archaic, to say the least.
so this could explain why we have teen takeovers in cities like
Yes,
Chicago or in Philadelphia.
absolutely.
This is the generation of children who are experiencing restorative justice, where they've done something, they've assaulted someone or they were disrespectful, and they were rewarded in
Yes.
essence for what they
Mhm.
did versus receiving a harsh penalty or consequence. This is insane. Like, I hate it here. Like, I'm ready to go to glory because I'm going to end up encountering one of these scholars on the street
Mhm.
who all they know is restorative justice, or they try to come to my home in an effort to break into my home and harm me. And now it makes sense why they're confused as to when bad things happen to them. They're confused. Like, well,
It is confusing. In their defense, it is confusing because on the high school campus, a school resource officer can say, "Give me your phone," and I could tell them no. And I will not be, manhandled like I would be on the street if I tell an officer no. If an
right.
officer orders you out of the car, or does something a couple of times, and you're belligerent, like we've seen in some instances on the news, you're belligerent and you're saying no because that's what you become accustomed to. You said no to your school resource officer. They're wearing a badge, they have a gun. You say, "No, I'm not giving you my phone." And that's why you've seen on the news instances where officers are getting into tussles with students. Once again, the teachers are held accountable for that. If a student has a phone in the classroom, a principal walks in, the student is on their phone, you will be rated poorly. Okay, so teachers have become vigilant against the phone. Give me the phone. I don't want to be rated poorly. Put your phone away. Give me the phone. The students say no. So therefore, you see a teacher trying to remove the phone from the student, and the student reacting in pure violence towards that teacher,
Yeah,
as well
see,
as the school resource officer.
I'm the last there are no victims here. There are no victims here. However, this is a very wicked and sinister agenda and assault that is being placed on this generation coming up. And I don't want to say that it's not their fault. I don't want to say that because
Yes,
I can see why people would want to say it. Here's where I would push back, because if I'm taught at home that you are to respect and submit yourself to authority, you don't talk to a teacher this way. And then when I go to school, if that's not being reinforced or taught in school, that's fine, because I know the moment that I choose to defy what I'm being taught at home, I'm going to get handled at home. But if you're not handled at home and it's not handled in school properly, these children get out into the real world, and that's where they find out that fat meat is greasy. That's when they're like, "Oh, this cop just threw me to the ground. I just got tased,"
absolutely.
or worse, "I just got shot in the back." Because all I know is that when an officer tells me, he gives me a direct command, I say no, or I decide that I'm going to use physical violence because I feel oh, I
And the
wasn't ready.
officers are, yeah, the officers are also given initiatives that you're not there on the campus to prosecute law. You're there to form relationships. Yes.
What?
So that they're, yes. It's a subset of community policing where you go there to form relationships so they don't see you as a dark figure, but rather a human that's there to help them and protect them. That all sounds good, but when they're committing crimes, they're getting away with it. So the students walk away with it like, "Oh, that officer, he's soft. He doesn't do anything. I could do whatever I want. He's soft," and they just have they just have a incorrect concept of what a law enforcement is actually off the campus, which they're not so soft, and they can easily realize the consequences that you have described, being hurt, being shot, and things of that nature.
There's so many scriptural violations here that are just coming to mind. A child left to himself, or when you fail to
Exactly.
restrain the evil, or Romans, is it Romans 13 or 4? Like, I don't I don't understand. I do understand. I am just struggling with wrapping my mind around how a country could allow we are effectively destroying ourselves from within because we really think that we know better than God, and we think that we're doing
Exactly.
our children some sort of favor by failing to hold them accountable and wanting to, you called it relation, what was it called again?
Building relationships. And that's like the term
Right.
that they use even with teachers. You want to build relationships. So we're moving away. It's like the gentle parenting of teaching. So we see it
Mm.
all of society. We want to be gentle parenting. Police officers, you don't, court system, you don't want to do bail because this is too harsh. They can't afford bail. So we let them back on the street to reoffend. So it's systemic across society. It's lowering of our discipline, lowering of the standards all across the board.
You raise a very interesting point because obviously you and I both are Christian wives and moms, and I can't tell you how much pushback that I receive from Christian women when I just appeal to what the scriptures teach regarding discipline and instruction and the rod of correction. And I've had them explicitly tell me, oh no, we don't do that in this house. There's no
Of course. Yes.
need for us to spank because I can just have a gentle conversation with little Billy and he just complies. I'm like, really? I'm like, so when little Billy tried to choke me out, the adult,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to put my hands on him, like little Billy is clearly the gentle parenting the Bible has given us in parenting. I'm not saying that we need to be to the extreme and exercise physical assault on our children like their name is Kunta Kinte. That's not what I'm saying, right? Because some of us, my husband was he was whipped like his name was Kunta, but the point I am making is that you cannot bypass what the Bible teaches about instruction and discipline when the scriptures tell you, when you fail to enact using that, you hate, when you withhold it, you hate your
Absolutely.
child. That's a
Hatred.
form of
Yeah.
hatred. And some people refuse, they can see those scriptures, those black letters on white pages, and they will still rebel against it and be like, I just don't believe that. And then we're confused when little Billy has the teacher hemmed up in a corner trying to take her out. It's because we want to
Yes.
build a relationship versus recognizing
Mhm.
that this child is unruly and undisciplined.
So that leads us to our special education system in America. Students identified with various behavior and learning disabilities. So, according to the ADA, they're supposed to receive they're supposed to receive accommodations for their disabilities. So, let's say I have a student with Tourette's. Okay,
Okay.
I cannot penalize that student for anything that's a result of their learning disability. So if they blurt out curse words, we have this model of inclusion where that said student is included in the mainstream classroom with everyone. So inclusion means those students with learning disabilities are integrated into the classroom. They receive modified assignments, and if they have a behavior disability, they get modified behavior plans. Okay, so let's just say I have a student with Tourette's and he blurts out curse words. He